Hello and welcome to the next edition of our Content Circle of Life webinar series. Today we're going to discuss some of the predictions for 2024 and beyond. I am Bart Spriester, the Senior Vice President and General Manager of the Streaming, Broadcast, and Advertising Business Unit within Comcast Technology Solutions. I am joined today by three distinguished gentlemen, Peter Gibson, Justin Morgan, and Paul Clausen. Well, gentlemen, we're well into the 2020s, and these first 3 years have been a wild ride indeed. Content providers, advertisers, the MVPDs all have seen unpredictable impacts to their business models, their go-to-market strategies, and their ability to scale. Between new tech and new challenges, what do we think 2024 will bring? We've asked some of our great leaders here to dust off the old crystal ball and share some of their thoughts. So let's start looking at some slides and talk about our sports content, because sports remains a highly coveted business model for all of linear TV. So Peter, let me ask you your thoughts on the trends in sports. And as we look ahead in 2024, sports rights are becoming important as ever to drive consumer interest and to drive signups. What are your thoughts on the sports business, and how are consumers going to find this content in 2024?
Yeah, great question, Bart. And it's quite interesting, I think, what we've seen play out in the sports marketplace. Sports rights are as important as they've ever been to drive consumer sign up, consumer interest. We've seen traditional, tier one media entertainment platforms starting to explore, Netflix, for example, starting to look at using sports as another means to attract subscribers. I think we'll continue to see that play out in 2024. The other kind of major macro level consideration too, I think, is consumers finding that content. Now that you've kind of got everyone dabbling in sports rights and having ownership of a particular team or a particular set of events during a calendar year, it's quite fragmented where you find your favorite team. So I think the consumer experience has to be looked at of how do you transition from one platform to the other, and how do we make that discoverability seamless to the consumer such that they're not frustrated. Or I think we've even seen in colleagues or friends of mine where they're challenged even finding out where their team is playing on a given Sunday, or a given any day of the week for that matter, because now the rights for that content have been acquired by someone else or sold on. So there's still a bit of a challenge in the consumer space of finding out the sweet spot for that experience. And then I think the other narrative here too is the RSN model, which we kind of highlighted in the slide, where the regional sportsnet model has been challenged. We're going to continue to see that, and I think particularly with tier two content right platforms in the sports space, they're going to be challenged to look at the financials of those rights and the shift in that model from RSN at the cable level now to a direct consumer experience, how that plays out. And I think 24 will see more of that kind of financial look at the economics of the sports model.
Yeah, I think you're right. Discovery becomes a challenge in this fragmented kind of sports rights market. Paul, what are your thoughts on that? I know there are different tools we can use to investigate and find content quicker, but what are the things on the horizon? What should consumers be looking at?
Yeah, great question. Well, as Peter mentioned, just finding the content, when it's on, where it's on, all of that, that's one challenge. But I think another challenge is once a viewer is tuned in, how do you keep them engaged? You've got highly valuable content. How do you keep them engaged in a sticky, compelling experience that they love? And part of it's about enabling consumers to navigate that sports entertainment experience on their terms, watching their favorite team, their favorite player, their favorite golfer, golfing their round, their favorite driver, and being able to navigate through multiple camera angles, audio tracks, and really consume that experience on their terms, watching what they want to watch, when they want to watch it. And all of that takes scale in production, real time, and it requires, frankly, AI and ML to be able to parse through what are the relevant moments, provide the metadata so that it is searchable, it can be found and navigated to, and you have the length, you know what's happened in the clip or the highlight, and put the user in charge of navigating it, rather than some editor in a back room curating a highlights reel for you. It's the individual subscriber using their own trick modes, their remote control. They're in control of it and navigating through it on their terms, and that's really going to make it compelling, sticky, and keep eyeballs on content so that you can monetize it more, raise those CPMs. So I think that's where sports content is going to have to go to be able to justify some of the premiums that are being paid for sports rights.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. So I have a question on advertising. So maybe this is for Justin. So what will 2024 look like as advertisers strive for a consistent and maybe streamlined brand experience across all their channels? Do you have any thoughts on that, Justin?
Yeah, no, thanks, Bart. Yeah, so I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge in 2024, to be honest. Consistent and streamlined messaging will continue to be quite difficult, especially as the number of messaging channels will increase, and the number of technology platforms out there continue to increase as well, in order to activate and manage them. Unfortunately, both of those items will increase the complexity for the advertiser due to the additional integration points and simply maintaining the consistency of data to ensure brand safety and a cohesive message across all these different channels, linear broadcast, OTT, social, web, mobile. I mean, there's countless, goes on and on and on. I think we will see also a continued increase in different platforms and tools as we continue to go forward. So there's already a ton out there. I think that will increase as the year goes on, and that will also, increase the complexity then for our advertisers. I think at the core of all that is data. Consistent data is the component that will help all of our advertisers achieve success in this category. I think in 2024, we'll see brands, advertisers start to think about investing in new technology and strategies that will allow more effective and efficient orchestration across all channels to ensure, again, that brand consistency and, quite frankly, the relevant content across all of those mediums.
Yeah, Justin, you mentioned data and the importance of data, and that advertisers are looking at maybe contextual advertising for brand alignment and maybe brand safety, and they can only get that from, I would say, real rich and effective data on their advertising. So I know, Paul, you have some thoughts on this. What's your thinking on 2024 and the use of more enhanced data streams for advertising?
Yeah, great question. So even before we had some of the regulatory changes for privacy, and we've heard about the cookies crumbling, there's increasing amounts of data that and studies that show that placing advertising contextually has benefits in brand recall, brand association, attention during an advertising or an advertisement. So placing ads contextually has some proven value on its own, but when you combine it with some of the headwinds of privacy regulations and targeting, it really raises it to a new level of importance. Suitability also matters. So having your ads, your brand placed against content that really isn't suitable for the message that you're trying to convey can leave does impact the perception of your brand, whether you like it or not. So having things like GARM and IAB3 sensitivity tags that can be made available both at the asset level and at the segment level is going to be increasingly important. And in 2024, I think we've kind of had a little bit of a chicken and the egg impediment to contextual advertising. Is there enough data available about a high enough amount of content to get scale so that brand advertisers can choose and place, using decisioning tools? And I think in 2024, we're beginning to see brands demand that capability to be able to place their brands, with brand safety. So I think, and the data is now available through the application of AI, being able to do deep scanning of, frame by frame analysis, every millisecond of audio, every word that's on screen. We can now come up with the kind of data that's needed to be able to place an ad at the right place at the right time with brand safety, through decisioning tools that are leveraging the mass amount of data that we now can make available.
Yeah, for sure. So, sticking on the topic of advertising, and related, I guess, to the renewed emphasis of advertising for 2024, programmatic continues to be top of mind for both the buy and the sell side of industry brands. So, but Justin, how do you think this is going to evolve in 2024, and do you have any predictions on that?
Sure. Thanks, Bart. So yes, I think jumping off of what Paul was talking about with contextual, we have programmatic, we have addressable, and I think quite frankly, all three of those will continue to advance and will be used more and more across more channels, including more traditional mediums like linear broadcast, for instance. The goal across really all of these has always been to be more streamlined, more efficient, and hopefully then more effective when we're delivering these messages out to current or potential customers, trying to get them to either to these companies to acquire new customers or upgrade those customers into different tiers. Again, I kind of feel like a little bit of a broken record on this, but data, again, will play a critical role on both the buy and the sell sides, as Paul kind of mentioned before with contextual. And quite frankly, this will present an issue and continue to present an issue because those two data sets are a bit siloed from the buy and the sell side. Specifically on the buy side, the advertiser, they tend to struggle a bit with fragmented data coming from various sources, right? Getting a consistent and a centralized set of data to then use for targeting across all channels can be quite complicated when you have all of these different platforms and mediums that you have to, integrate with. So without a consistent and centralized data set on the buy side, no matter how consistent or centralized it is on the sell side, it's going to cause friction or cause problems there. Since both sides usually work in these data silos, the data sets are often inconsistent, which causes some missed opportunities and, quite frankly, leads to increased costs on both sides of the house. I think when we look at 2024, we'll see the buy side specifically, I think, start to think about bridging those gaps. And again, as I said before, really start to invest in some of this new technology and strategies that will allow them to be more consistent and aligned for those data sets so that they can really unleash the true power of what programmatic as well as addressability can do in their advertising.
No, that makes complete sense. So maybe one final advertising related question. We've definitely seen fast channels have disrupted the market the past couple of years. So maybe a question for Peter. What can we expect in 2024 as it relates to fast?
Yeah, we've certainly seen quite a change. Even that last slide illustrated, fast is here to stay, for one. We've seen it emerge in the marketplace, and now as it represents, there's a demographic out there where that fast channel experience and free content is certainly appealing. But there's also a little bit of saturation too that comes along with that. We don't want to fall back to the past behaviors of, you see it on some of these fast platforms where you've just got now hundreds of channels. And again, from a consumer standpoint, what to watch, is also a bit of a challenge. So it's really evolving fast into personalizing that experience. There's still great content out there, but how do you personalize it and really drive the highest CPMs that you can based on the engagement of the consumer. I think internationally in 24, we're going to continue to see the emergence of FAST. I think certainly in North America, that landscape is established. I think there's a good market there. And again, it's more about personalizing the consumer experience. But certainly internationally, there's a lot of opportunity for growth in the FAST channel emergence, in regional emergence across streaming platforms. And I think we'll continue to see that play out as we go through the year.
No, I think that makes sense. FAST is definitely here to stay. So I guess maybe another question for Peter, as we move more to bundling and streaming, what does this mean, you think, as far as the industry in terms of challenges and opportunity in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, I think it's quite amazing. I think we have there's a slide on this that shows, it shows how far we've come in that, nobody would have thought that a couple of years back, even you poll, leading execs from across media platforms where bundling now represents as many of the signups as a, direct consumer experience and signing up directly for that subscription platform. So it's quite amazing how much I think the consumer has come along. I think it's less of a barrier to entry too, where you can do bundling and you're signing up for, one service, whether it's broadband or cell service, and then you can get access to other platforms. So we're really seeing the market say, yeah, it wants bundling, and consumers are saying, yeah, we're happy to bundle our content. I think it represents an opportunity for particularly aggregators to think about that consumer experience of app store integration of now that you've got access to so many different subscription services, continue to see how that discoverability plays into that experience. So I think certainly, it's as the chart kind of lays out here, it's quite fascinating how the industry has shifted to, acceptance of bundling, and it's now driving. I think any content owners need to even be considering how they're driving, the bundling of their content with other platforms and services, because certainly consumers are saying that, yeah, they're happy to sign up in that way.
Yeah, I definitely think the streaming wars of a few years ago have or will be shifting to the bundling wars in the coming years. But maybe, Paul, let me ask you, what do you think is maybe driving this general shift? But probably more important, what does this mean for the consumer?
Well, as far as the bundling goes, I mean, being able to pull multiple types of content together along with other services, and being able to do sell through, combining all of those different experiences that we've talked about earlier, really gives the consumer an experience that they're not going to be able to find, with single mode operators. So. I want to come back to one thing that, just to add on to what Peter was saying around the fast and thematic and personalized, being able to provide clips and, metadata around thematic channels and personalized fast channels that maybe instead of episodic full episodes have clips that are relevant to a personalized thematic channel is going to be another element of bundling content from different sources.
No, I think that's exactly right. So maybe shifting gears a little bit into a very hot topic of generative AI. So generative AI is definitely on the rise. And we believe that AI will definitely affect advertisers in 2024. But maybe the question for Justin, where does generative AI sit in the production life cycle on the buy side, and how will it change in 2024?
Yeah, thanks, Bart. So as far as generative AI or Gen AI is concerned, I think we're going to see a shift from this kind of, I want, generative AI, I want to test that out, to a need for this type of technology as we see the exponential need for video content across, whether it be social media platforms or others, will just increase exponentially. Today, I think advertisers are a bit weary about using generative AI. And this is really around the risk of brand safety, having consistent messages out in the market. It's just one of those things where just uncomfortable about, having something else generate all this stuff and not necessarily knowing what is going to come out on the other side. So I think although there's a want for this stuff today, because it would get to cost savings, efficiency, it sometimes is quite frankly outweighed by the benefits are outweighed by the risk that's involved, and that's especially in highly regulated industries like telecommunications or pharmaceuticals. The risk is just really high there in terms of having something that is simply off-brand. I think we will see a shift from technologists and AI platforms to start to help brands really become more comfortable with Gen AI by introducing guardrails that will hopefully then protect advertisers from the AI generating creative that maybe is inconsistent or off-brand or even potentially breaking industry regulations. I think we'll see more platforms in this space move towards training AI to use things like brand guidelines to ensure brand consistent creative, while also introducing efficiencies to really exponentially create advertising for all of these targeted needs that are going to be happening with programmatic, addressable, contextual for audiences or individuals. We're already seeing some partners of ours introducing this kind of AI management. And although I don't really see the larger advertisers immediately jumping in head first in 2024, I do think that by the second half of 2024, this type of approach will begin to scale as advertisers get comfortable with it and realize the potential gains by getting better at cutting costs, getting faster by removing manual efforts, and getting smarter by attaining better results from their advertising efforts. So I guess in short, I think there's a bright future here for generative AI from an advertiser perspective.
Yeah, it's definitely watch this space kind of area. And it certainly is getting a lot of attention these days. Maybe I'll ask Peter or Paul if they have any other predictions on what we could see in the Gen AI space for 2024.
Yeah, happy to jump in there. I mean, we're just scratching the surface, in where we looked at the slide and all the different applications of Gen AI. I certainly think it's something that exponentially in 24 we'll see advancements. It's such a emerging technology, but I think it's really, when we look at production cycles, will be fascinating to see of how Gen AI start. Justin hit on it from an advertising perspective, but in also in the media entertainment content, it will be. Are we going to see it across anime, across kids content, across theatrical? Where do we start to apply Gen AI content production into that life cycle across all areas? And we've seen it from upstream and workflow production to the content itself to distribution efficiencies and other areas. So I think it's almost one where we're certainly looking at some of the technology from our perspective in our business, but also just being on the sideline and watching it, how rapidly we've all seen it over the past year. I'm sure there's all personal projects where we've kind of dabbled in using Gen AI and just seeing how advanced it is. But really, I think content production, to me, when we see first iteration or first gen, no pun, technology on Gen AI emerge in the marketplace where this is Gen AI produced content, we're seeing studios, broadcasters look at it for game show content and other areas. So a lot of that's just early kind of skunk work, beta type projects. But when it becomes mainstream, does that accelerate dramatically? We'll see where the technology takes us, but it's going to be fascinating just to watch it in 24 continue to gain momentum.
I would just add that we're using both discriminative and generative AI models in video AI. And so where we're already seeing some of the generative technologies pay off is in generating synopsis or short descriptions, long descriptions for clips. So you might have an episodic piece of content you're pulling out of several clips, or you have a piece of news content you're pulling out clips, and you need to be able to generate a synopsis of what's going on inside of a small piece of content. And so that's where generative can really help you out to be able to determine that and produce that on a segment by segment level. So that's just one area where we're already beginning to see benefits. But I'd agree with Peter, we're just barely scratching the surface of where I think this is going.
Yeah, exactly. I would just go back to my other comment of watch this space. I think it's going to change very, very fast over the next weeks, months, and years. Maybe switching gears again. I think we all agree that aggregation of content is increasingly important. But a couple questions kind of come to mind. Who then owns the customer? And I guess ultimately, how does this all relate to the consumer experience? And what are some of the considerations there? So maybe let me throw this to Paul and see if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, so there's a variety of different taxonomies and types of different data that are relevant in this space. So we've talked a lot already about knowing about what's going on inside of content, but there's identity data, there's consumption data, there's what are the rights and rights windows for content. There's advertising data. So all of this going together, to Justin's earlier point, there's massive amounts of data with a variety of different taxonomies, and whoever can control or manage that data well and apply it to what's being broadcast, the scheduling, how it's being presented so it's discoverable, how it can be navigated, how advertising is being inserted. All of that's going to be a key to success, I think, in the overall aggregation. Who owns the customer? It's going to be whoever has the best management of the data, actually, and can present the best experience that keeps the user sticky, keeps them engaged, keeps them logging in, watching, increasing the economic life cycle of a subscription. Presenting more spots for advertising, but also enabling higher monetization for those spots. So those that are successful with managing the data and achieving those outcomes are going to be the ones that are going to own the subscribers.
No, that sounds pretty good. I know, Peter, you've spent a lot of time thinking about this as well. Do you have any maybe additional thoughts on that, or anything on data management for 2024? Anything you think we should expect?
Yeah, I think Paul hit on some of the considerations. To me, it's how do we reduce the friction for the consumer, and that's what we should be thinking about as aggregators. It's how do you make it as seamless as possible for them to discover the content. The last slide hit on some of the challenges where that should be upstream from the consumer, managing the identity of all the different content access, all the different license windows. I think there's an opportunity for aggregators to play with different, again, bundling scenarios around license windows, around which content gets presented to the consumer, understanding kind of cohorts within that subscriber base across all the different content experiences, how they can discover and find content. But it really is what we want to see from a consumer standpoint would be a reduction in that friction, and just make access to the content and discoverability, personalization, all those components as seamless as possible. I think, as I mentioned, for aggregators, the opportunity is to streamline the complexities of all the different license windows and content rights and app store integration, identity integration into the back end, and have the best consumer experience that you can possibly have, incorporating elements of fast channels as well into that. As you look at an overall aggregation model, you can look at upselling the consumer into different tiers based on the content they have. So it's another area in 24. I think we'll see improvements we still have a lot of work to get to, I think, to really reimagine what that consumer experience looks like watching content and getting access to the different platforms they have. So it's going to be another fascinating space to watch in 24, how that continues to play out.
No, I definitely agree. So, okay, our final thoughts, and maybe we do this as a bit of a speed round for all you three experts here. So recently, we've seen large-scale labor strikes in many of the industries tied to film and television. And of course, the creators, the writers, and the directors, as well as the actors themselves, the talent, have been probably the most covered. And we saw firsthand, how these work stoppages, impacted the business, the content business, the media business. And it's not just pushing out dates, premiere dates, but it's also, impacting the day-to-day programming and advertising for kind of the ecosystem. So maybe starting with you, Justin, first, what do you think the impact on 2024 will look like as a result?
Yeah, so I think, if I look at all of that stuff with SAG-AFTRA and all of that contract dispute, and I just look at 2024 in general in terms of just getting back to, I would say, full normalcy in terms of how consumers are kind of out there acting in the marketplace. I think we're going to see a much bigger push at things like large-scale movie premieres. I think we're going to see a lot of advertising around those, around the shows that are being produced. I think there's going to be a big backlog of content that needs to be advertised for. I think what that then leads to is, how do you get that advertising out there? I think the mix of how advertising is happening will probably shift quite a bit. I think there'll be more digital, but linear is not going away anytime soon either, but there'll be a different mix probably out there. And again, I think that goes back to that data point in terms of making sure that we have consistent and accurate data, aligned data, to make sure that advertising can be as efficient as possible and get the best results as possible in the marketplace.
No, that sounds good. So continuing on with the speed round a bit, all the strikes with the directors and the talent. Peter, what do you think? How's that going to impact 2024?
Yeah, I mean, we always say content is king, and again, in as much as it ever has been, we saw the result of the strike play out in the quarterly financials of many of the premium content platforms. So it definitely had an impact. I go back to maybe my comment on Gen AI. To me, it's how Gen AI starts to emerge in content production. That's going to be fascinating. We haven't really seen it as of yet. There's been lots of great ideas, but how does that become mainstream? How does that get into production cycles? So for me, 2024 is all about seeing how that plays out. It's going to be, again, fascinating to watch and be part of that.
Final thought on the talent labor strikes, Paul?
Yeah, I would just say, there's no substitute for great stories, and so we need great writers and we need great stories, but the costs are going to continue to go up for great content, and so therefore the monetization is increasingly important. So being able to bring content to subscribers on their terms, with whatever subscription business model that they need. So variable ad loading from full subscription, no ads, to lots of ads and everything in between. Plus being able to do product placements, being able to creatively insert product messages and derive sell-through opportunities from content. I think are going to be keys to being able to actually make the investment in that content, the development, the production, all pay off in the end.
Well, I think, gentlemen, that is a wrap. Thank you for spending your time and giving us some of your predictions for 2024 and beyond. And we appreciate everyone listening to our Content Circle of Life webinar web series. Thank you.